Hi, I'm Sue Swinand. I feel so lucky to be here in the forest today on this hot day. It's cool and lovely. We're over at the Summer Star Wildlife Sanctuary in Boylston, Mass. And it's a pristine natural preserve of 45 acres of forest, wetlands, and marsh. And what makes it even more important is that it connects with the Mount Pisgah Conservation Land and about 700 acres of adjoining protected forest in Berlin and Northborough, all part of the Concord River watershed system. So it creates critical wildlife corridors, linking and expanding habitats. This sanctuary is a gift to us from philanthropist and philosopher Xiaolin Liu. She's a firm believer in nature's power to heal and restore us. She's a quiet, unassuming woman who talks about modern man having nature deficit disorder, and I couldn't agree more. If you haven't read the book, The Last Child in the Woods, get it. It's really an important work. She has said that her goal is to bring nature to the public for free. Imagine school children from the inner city, or even adults who have seldom, if ever, been in a real forest. They won't be coming here for parties or weddings. There will be no gift shops or restaurants. What they are offered is a direct encounter with the natural world. Her many projects aim to help human beings cope with life in our industrial environment through direct experience of nature, art, and music. This building, the Trailhead House, was designed by architects Dewing Schmidt Kearns, who give a nod to the visionary forefather of environmental architecture, Malcolm Wells. His philosophy of green buildings is finally catching on in architecture everywhere. His mission was to build gently. The Trailhead House focuses its design on sustainability and respect for nature. Let's go inside. The visual arts play an important role in the programming at Summer Star Wildlife Sanctuary. And here we're in the Linden Street Gallery, which is a lovely space dedicated to the exhibition of fine arts. And I am very privileged to have with me today the artist whose work is being shown this summer, George Herman. And I thank you so much for
welcome,
being
Sue.
here and telling us about your work.
Oh yeah, no, this will be great.
I really love his work and have been enjoying looking at it every time I come in. Mm-hmm. So first I thought maybe we would tell the audience a little bit about this space, a little bit more about the building.
Yeah.
And maybe how that has impacted you or what strikes you about the
Well, I didn't know that much about the building before, obviously meeting Xiaolin. And as I got to know her and about her ideas for the building and for the wildlife sanctuary, I sort of felt more of a connection in that it would be a really, interesting place to show my work. As far as the building goes, I know you spoke with her a little bit, but, it's a totally green, ecologically, ahead of the curve building. And
I think it's received the top gold star rating from the Green Building
they've
Council.
won at least 1 or 2 awards already, and it is just sort of beautifully situated in the woods, and so I think to have the art within the building and then the building within the woods, and and then my work to some degree deals with nature or landscape or my surroundings. I feel good about showing my work here now. Yeah.
I love the way the gallery is set so gently into the landscape.
Right.
There's almost no separation. You really feel the connection
Right.
between the outside and the inside.
Yeah, I think
It's
when you
beautiful.
walk up from the
Yeah.
parking lot, it just sort of
Yeah.
emerges out of the woods,
There's
more
so
or
many.
less.
There's so many wonderful features to the building. They have a green rooftop with the gardens growing on it. They have the what do they call it? Photovoltaic cells generating the electricity. They have
Yeah.
the biodegradable toilets. The whole thing is just terrific.
Yeah, and they have, they're working also with the Audubon Society and the Tufts Veterinary School, and they have a room here where they'll have a camera, creating a live feed from the Tufts Veterinary Center where they're healing animals.
Healing the
And,
wildlife.
Yeah, healing wildlife, and so you could see that here, and then I guess, with certain animals, once they are healed, they'll bring them out here and then they'll release them into the wild here. So, it's just, again, that really
It
sort
has a
of
lot
connection.
of wonderful possibilities for connecting to the
Oh, yeah,
nature.
yeah.
So I want to talk primarily about your work and the show. And what is the title of your show?
The title is Elements, and I sort of go around in my head about creating titles for the show and for my work and so on. But I guess the idea of elements was that these pieces and a lot of the work that I do in general are sort of everyday elements that I encounter in my life. There's not a tremendous grand theme, or major political statement, or fascinating narrative that goes on, other than the elements of a person's life, which are there every day and which become, part and parcel of that life, and in this case, it's my life. So there are things that are around me, and that I see every day, or pass through every day, or encounter every day, more or less. So that's the elements.
I was looking at these few pieces here and noticing how much they are about an environment of outdoor light and space and organic kind of feeling, and then how they seem to have a little bit of a man-made element.
Right, right. Well, the reason that I sort of wanted to talk about this painting in particular, because I feel like it's a good example of a number of the things that I do and the type of work that I'm doing and have been doing lately. And, so for example, this is part of a series of paintings that I call the Amtrak Series. And it's based on photographs that I took traveling to and from New York to Boston and back. I had a show in New York in the winter. And taking a lot of photographs and then, getting them up on the computer and fooling around with them, and then using a few of them to work from paintings. And so this one, I tried a number of different things. One of the things about my paintings in general is that I work on old paintings. And so, I'll take out paintings that maybe I did a year ago, 2 years ago, 5 years ago, and maybe I'm not that crazy about them anymore. I'll scrape them down, and I use, just a scraper that you would use to scrape house paint or wallpaper and sandpaper.
And these are on wood, of course.
These are all on wood, yeah. But these, I think, all except for maybe one in this show are on wood. And then I paint on them again, and then very often scrape down and paint. So it's a lot of sort of starting and stopping. So a lot of the stuff from the previous paintings sort of comes through in terms of color and texture and marks and so on. And so that's, happens sort of over a period of time, and then sort of in the more sort of short-term thing, so this was already a distressed canvas or surface. And then I started doing one of my paintings from the, based on my Amtrak photographs, and again, scraped and scraped and scraped. And then I started, okay, I'm going to have the tracks here, and then there'll be whatever was going on here. But then I had the tracks, and I felt like, oh, that's the painting. the tracks against all this stuff over here.
Yeah.
And so, and just again, as another example, right currently, I'm working on a series of paintings that I really just started about a week or so ago, that are paintings of sticks. Very exciting. But, and they started because I was doing a painting, again, on an old surface, and I had an image of a bird that I found. I was painting the bird. I thought that might be something I would do. But I started out with a little branch that the bird was sitting on, and as soon as I had the branch, I could say, oh, that's the painting.
That's it.
So since then, I've been doing a number, I have about 7 or 8 now, of just the little.
You see, that's a really interesting thing, is to leave something out like that. But I think it makes the elements that you have there all the more powerful when you don't have as many. You don't spell it all out or put too many notes. And to me, there's a certain poetry to having these few simple lines, because there's no line here. There's no shape here. It's just texture and color and loose, amorphous air, atmosphere, smoke, sky, steam, whatever. But then these, I don't know if you can notice, but these tracks are rendered in a very detailed, concrete way. And it's just a very poetic juxtaposition.
Oh, well, thanks. Yeah, no, that's, so again, I'm fond of this, expression, and I forget who said it originally, and I'm probably not getting it exactly right, but it's something along the lines of, art is what happens on the way to making art. So you might have some things in mind that you're aiming for.
Idea.
Right. But in fact, what happens is, or it could say it's like the journey rather than the destination. It gives you a reason
to start.
To start,
you get an idea, that's a reason to start, and then you don't know where it's going to go.
Right.
I agree entirely.
Yeah.
I agree entirely.
So that's sort of what's happening here.
These have a similar idea about them in that they have so much of a feeling of outdoors and atmosphere and light, and almost like a Claude Lorraine, that kind of golden atmosphere.
Yeah.
But then the one little telephone pole. Just
and
shooting up
and
into...
there are wires in there too, telephone wires.
The geometry of those wires and the precision of those wires against all that loose, rough, brushed color. I love the way the glaze on that is so deep and lush.
Well, I work in like a lot of layers, and some come from, I say, well, that's scraping that I do, the scraping down and painting over, sanding down and painting over. But then there's also, sort of more transparent layers of paint too that will go on, like say sort of glazed on, and then wiped away, and glazed on and wiped away. And and I use also, palette knife, and I use my hands, and I use a brush, and,
You must use some kind of resiny jelly.
I mainly use, again, all these, I say oil and mixed mediums, because I use a bunch of different things. But actually, the main medium is Galkid.
Yeah.
And maybe you've used that.
Yeah, I like the liquid.
Yeah, liquid is a similar thing, right? And what I find with the Galkid... He's an impasto. Yeah, no, what I find for me, as compared to regular linseed oil, the Galkid dries a little quicker, and somehow I'm able to do a lot of layers of it without actually building up like a really thick surface.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Interesting.
So the Galkid, is just sort of the right pace.
That's very interesting. Because with the impasto, you do get a thick surface.
Yeah,
and then you're stuck with it.
Right.
You have to deal with it later.
Yeah. So I can get a lot of thin layers.
Let's look at a couple more.
Sure.
Well, these are a little bit different. When were these done? Are these earlier, or?
Well, these are also fairly recent. This black and white series is from last year, this year, and we're talking 2015. So, within the last year or 2 years, I've done a number of paintings that are basically black and white.
So you work in a series, and then you kind of work out one idea, and then...
Exactly. And, the black and white series, I guess... you know, what I often do when I'm starting a new series of paintings is I'll often start with just black and white and then sort of gradually introduce color. So I get sort of the form and the shapes and the basic ideas down
The
or something.
basic layout of the dark and light masses.
Yeah, and but in this case, I think, you know, once I started that, there was something that I liked about just the black and white. And then the other thing that started interesting me was then to eliminate a lot of stuff and leave a lot of white space in something I think about, you know, really trying to eliminate a lot, and leave just the essential part of it.
You know, part of the reason I think artists, this could be true for you, maybe, but often artists leave things undone so that the viewer can participate more and add and fulfill and flesh out ideas that they might have, or so that they have to participate more in the creation of the work. And I think that's one of the things that really appeals to me about having artwork at this place, is how it is encouraging people to have an experience that is rewarding and satisfying and uplifting from, you know, having that. I think the arts do that the same way nature does. They help you transcend your ordinary and experience it more fully, perhaps.
Yeah, no, that's a good point, I think.
I love the way some of the edges are lost and the forms are very diffused, but then other places he uses this beautiful, sharp, crisp line, and you can just sort of see the negative of it over here. And then tell us about how you did a passage like this.
Well, for these paintings and for a lot of the paintings I've done over the last few years where it's dealing with nature or landscape imagery and so on, I actually I have some very inexpensive rubber stamps. And rubber stamps are, sometimes they're of, you know, foliage things, and even more often they're of like little insects.
Oh, for
and so that's what I basically to
just
get like a lot of
gives
stuff.
you the randomness.
Yeah. And so, you know, I put paint on those stamps and I like that.
No kidding.
And so that's how I get a lot of these effects. And then I also use different things like sponges or pieces of cardboard, or, you know, sort of wadding up a rag, you know, putting paint on it and dabbing that. So lots of different ways of doing that. And then also sort of cutting through it with the tip of the palette knife to get some of the lines, small lines and edges.
I love
and so
those
on.
little scritchy, scratchy lines, just like the pine tree has, that shoot out like little stickers, you know. So, you know, you talk about good design, and I think part of the reason I'm drawn to your work is because it has such good basic design in it.
Thanks.
But look at the way the pattern of darks pull you through the composition, and then the drama of this strong black against white geometry in this very important section of the painting. It's a lovely composition.
Oh, thanks. Yeah.
I'd like to see some of the abstract ones too. Let's look at some more.
Okay.
Now, this is a really abstract piece, but to me, it really speaks of nature. It just glows with some kind of light in the deep forest, or I love the lush color and deep, deep glazing that you do. Tell us a little bit about your...
Well, this one is actually an older painting in terms of, you know, compared to some of the others in the show. So this I probably started on about, I don't know, 7 or 8 years ago. It's 2008, so it's about 7 years ago. And then I was doing, you know, a series of landscapes that were sort of more just painterly abstractions of landscapes. And, you know, I've always sort of played around with dark versus light, and trying to get some, you know, strong feeling into that. You know, this also involves, you know, another process that I work with a lot, which is pouring paint. And so I'll have
It does have a liquid feel.
Yes.
And water is really like the source of everything. It's like life in nature, you know.
Well, yeah, and
it takes on all these shapes. And
exactly. Yeah, I mean, that's one of the things that, you know, working the way that I do and that I did with this kind of painting, where I'll have it flat on, you know, a couple of chairs or on the floor, and pour, and I use a variety of medium, you know, and some of it is oil paint, some of it with these things would have been a water-based paint that will butt up against the oil paint and
maybe repel each other
right,
a
and
little.
do some interesting things.
Or that you can see the way this one is really shiny and flat and levels out, so smooth, like glass almost. And then this one has that rough,
more matte.
opaque.
Yeah, and then so again, some of it will be more of a high gloss paint, and some of it will be more of a matte paint. Some of it will sort of sit more on the surface and be sort of, you know, glossy, and others will sort of be in the surface. You know, then there's the texture of the wood itself, which becomes part of it. I also, in this painting, use some amber shellac, and I use some gold pigment powder.
That's why it has such a glow.
Right. So a variety of media that are all sort of intersecting and playing up and playing off of one another. And again, so, but you know, as you were mentioning, sort of a similarity to nature itself. And I think, you know, that's one thing that I was sort of conscious of as I was doing them, that my way of painting, where, you know, I have some control over it, but it does a lot of stuff on its own, and it changes, you know, constantly, you know, is sort of like what happens in nature, you know, where things come together and go apart, and they burn down and they regrow and they grow over one another. So I think a lot of my method is sort of tied in with, you know, some sort of organic process like that,
Yeah.
I guess.
I think as artists, we study nature to see the way it forms itself, to the way it settles or grows or divides, or we study those organic processes.
Right.
And then somehow our reality comes through when we use those processes. The
Right.
materials make form that is authentic because it's made by nature, and the materials allowing them to do what they will.
Yeah, and you know, well, nature, you know, has, you know, all those textures and colors and shapes and you know, lines and masses and stuff. So there's all these abstract elements that are just out there in nature.
Is the wood a critical part of it? Like, does it ever work well on paper or canvas?
Well, you know, like I said, for this show and for most of my work, I almost always work on wood. You know, occasionally there'll be a canvas piece, but the wood enables me to scrape it down, to sand it down. Like I said, when I'm doing it as a horizontal surface, I can pour paint and then take a squeegee, sort of, you know, pieces of cardboard, and I scrape it across. I use a roller to roll it across. So the surface, you know, the wood surface really works well with that kind of stuff.
And every viscosity of paint will give a different spread. If it's thicker or thinner or runny or settling into the grooves of the wood.
Exactly.
I love the way the little grooves in the wood, it looks like little surface on water, doesn't it? Look like a pond surface, and you see into the surface of it an underlying green, or so it has. But that really reminds me of wet water on a flat plane.
Yeah. Well, that's great. I mean, I appreciate the fact that you're sort of bringing your own stuff to this too, and what you're seeing in it.
Water for you.
Well, it doesn't matter, you know. But again, I think that's always part of it for the artist. Is, you know, you do your thing here, and then the viewer brings their own stuff to it.
I think that makes it feel like a landscape, though. Imagine if we turned this canvas on its side, and those stripes were going this way.
It would be different.
The effect of landscape would not be the same.
Right. It would be a different thing. Yeah. Yeah, no,
Very
and
much
I'm
so.
conscious of that too, is, if there's a certain grain in the wood,
Sure.
which way I want to.
It settles
have it.
onto the spread of the land.
Right.
I also love the way he's designing with the texture. We talked about designing with masses of dark and light, but he's also repeating sizes and shapes of gloss, designing with the gloss and flat and rough and smooth.
Yeah.
And it's really
Well, so,
very
I feel like with me,
sensitive work.
there's always a balance between what I control and what I, really try to take control of in the painting, and what I'm just sort of leaving to its own
Yeah.
self.
Isn't
sort of.
that really a philosophical part of painting, though? I quote myself, holding on or letting go.
Right.
How much is important that I make it go,
Right.
or how much do I just let it be?
Well, and it's like, I guess I think of that as life too. There's certain things you
It's
can
everything.
control.
That's why
and certain
paintings are
things-
metaphors for life. It's like all the same kind of thing.
Yeah.
So I want to tell the audience how they can get in touch with you, where they can see more of your work, maybe what your website is.
Okay.
What's your website?
Well, the website is geherman.com, and so they can take a look at that. My email one is gherman@curry.edu, and phone number 781-820-0969. And also I have a show coming
we
up.
forgot to mention, though,
Right.
that you have a studio in Maynard.
Oh, I have a studio in
man,
Maynard,
we
right?
didn't- We missed a lot of stuff.
Art Space Maynard is a building with about 70 artists in it, and we're having an open studio event at the end of September. I think it's like the last weekend in September, Saturday and Sunday, the 26th and 27th. And then also I have an exhibit coming up at the Three Stones Gallery in West Concord, where I'll be showing my work with, I believe it's going to be 3 artists plus myself. And so might be some of these paintings and then some other newer stuff that I've been working on.
Oh.
And that'll be in September.
Oh, I love looking at your work, and I wish we had another hour at least to talk
Well, I've
about
enjoyed
it.
this, so.
Well,
thank
thanks
you.
so much
All
for
right.
coming. I
Thank you.
appreciate your time.
Oh, yeah, it's great.
And thank you for joining us, and we hope to see you another time for the next edition of Arts and Ideas.